Okay, starting to see some people flooding in the rooms. We're going to give folks a second to join. While we're gathering, as is my habit, I'd love to see where people are calling in from, and I've got a bonus question, which is how many change initiatives approximately is your company currently managing? So say hi from where you're at. Let us know where you're calling in from, and also if you know it, what's the number of different change initiatives that you're aware are going on in your company right now? Chat working for folks? There we go. St. Louis. I don't know. This is why I'm trying to change. That is a really good point. We need to have some visibility. Melody in Austin is estimating dozens. That sounds about right. Julianne, six in Austin also. Dallas, wow, we got a lot of Texas representation today. That's cool. About five, half a dozen or so. Hi, Teresa in Saratoga. Several in Canada with Deborah. Wow, lots. Carl in Boston has got 10 to 15. Same thing for Robert in downtown Chicago, 10 to 15. So this is pretty typical with the current research. A decade ago, we only had 2 to 5. Now it seems to be in most organizations, certainly in the Fortune 500, we're averaging around 12, seeing a range typically of four to half a dozen to 15 or so. Um, Tamara gives us it depends, which is always also true. So there's big change and small C changes going on across the organization. Let's see. Cool. And for those of you that have just joined, we're just kind of reporting in from where we're dialing in from, and then also how many change initiatives are you currently managing in your organization, just to kind of get a sense of what's going on. And then we'll kick off here in about a minute. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started because I want to make sure we can maximize the time for today as much as we can. We've got a really rich agenda and a lot more to learn from our panelists today. So, very briefly, I am Eric Wood. I am the Chief Strategy Officer at Tigerhall and the author of the Strategy Activation Playbook. I've been very honored to be able to host this series, but today is not about me. It's about our guests, and as well as you in the audience that have your questions and also comments to share with us. So, we are now wrapping up the last in a five-part series on standing up a transformation office. Today is our executive panel. I'm really thrilled that we're going to be learning some lessons from people who've been there and done that. So in a moment, we'll introduce them. Before we dive into that, I just want to highlight for folks that maybe are just joining this session and didn't see the others. We've got a five-part series that started off by talking about and building the business case for why transformation capacity is a future competitive advantage. So definitely check that out if you're building a business case for resources for your change initiatives. The second one examined the different models from centralized to decentralized along a spectrum with lots of examples of hybrid in the middle, and which of those might be the right models for the future. Then we had an 11-step conversation on how to set up a transformation office. And the intention of that webinar was really to say, whether you have one or not, you can either use this as a roadmap or a guide to think about the things that you should be considering as you build one, or you can use it as a maturity audit to understand what you're doing today, where are the potential gaps and opportunities against collective best practices. So hopefully that'll be useful for lots of folks. And then last week we talked about sustaining the transformation capability over time. Today's objectives are simply one thing. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to learn from experts that have been there and done that, as well as each other. So I encourage you to post questions in the chat. We're going to actually go through most of the conversation first, but I'm going to leave time at the end to actually have some open mic conversation with our panelists. We'll start off with some of the key questions in the chat if there's some key themes, and then we'll open the mics up for folks to be able to ask our panelists directly the questions that are on your mind. And with that, I would like to dive into introductions. So I'm joined today by three very experienced professionals that have had long careers both in their industries, but also in change and transformation. So Alex Bennett is joining us from a 20-year career in telecommunications with global postings across Europe and the Middle East. Lindsay Strawn is joining us with 14 years of experience at Ultimate Medical Academy, where she was selected to stand up the organization's transformation office for one of the country's largest health education schools. And Stacy Taylor, also 14 years at Visa, as well as a decade prior to that at Adobe, where she's worked at the intersection of finance, technology, and transformation. So all three have stewarded the formation of their organizations and their transformation capabilities within. So I'm delighted for the opportunity to learn from each of you today. Before we dive into the questions, I'd like to give you each 1 minute to introduce yourselves and maybe situate the audience in terms of the size and the scope and the mandate of your transformation offices. And I'm just going to go from left to right. So Alex, perhaps you can kick us off.
Eric, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hope you're well. Contextualizing what we're doing at the moment at GDC, as you probably know, NTT is global telecoms operation. It has a division within inside it, sort of 3,500 people, which is its global data center division. The transformation objective, and there is a team of 5 of us. So again, small team, familiar theme there, I'm sure you'll agree. And our role is to take the 4 regions, Asia Pac, India, Europe, America, and horizontally integrate them. That's the high level description. Underneath that is a horrendously difficult challenge to try and make that happen. Building foundational technology systems, cultural alignment, races, process and organizational change, and above all, trying to work out, are we doing the right things? Can we keep focused on our customers? Can we drive P&L? Are we still building data centers that service our clients and home AI in the right way? Or is this transformation denting our ability to be nimble? So the team are trying to work out consistently, are we achieving those things? And we have to hold a mirror up to ourselves every 3 months, I would say, to see how we need to change and evolve. I've got a great team, and I'm hoping I can share some of those insights today. Thank you, Eric.
Oh, we're delighted to have you, Alex. Thanks. Let's go to Lindsay.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric, and it's nice to see everyone. As Eric mentioned, I am the VP of the Office of Transformation for UMA, and we are a leader in allied healthcare, and we operate out of pretty much all 50 states in the US, but our corporate headquarters is based in Tampa, Florida. We have a little over 3,500 team members total, but we have over 100,000 alumni across all 50 states. And our primary goal over the next couple of years is to continue to grow that footprint to really help address the talent gap that we all are experiencing personally, specifically in the US in healthcare. My team specifically is 17 total people. We've grown a lot over the last 2 years, and we have roles from project management office to a change management office to an implementation team. So excited to be here to learn from the other panelists and to interact with all of you. Thanks.
Thanks, Lindsay. And Stacy.
All right. Thank you for having me here, Eric. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So I'm Stacy Taylor. I'm the head of the implementation and change practice within our enterprise transformation office. And Visa is the market leader in digital payments. Most of you probably are aware of us as a brand, but you may not know that we operate in over 200 countries and territories, and that we serve banks, merchants, and fintech. So we have a pretty broad portfolio. And our employee base is about 30,000, give or take a little bit. And that mighty workforce basically processes over 500 million digital transactions a day. So that's kind of the scope of what our business looks like. Within the Enterprise Transformation Office, we're a little bit larger than the other 2 panelists here, mostly I think as a reflection of the fact that Visa is a larger organization and has a global presence. So we're roughly about 27, 28, we'll probably max at 30. And our mandate is basically to focus on how do we drive and improve our operation. So it's all about the operating model. Where can we be more effective? Where can we be more efficient? How do we get faster delivery, faster time to market? Where can we get realized cost avoidance, cost efficiencies, cost savings, and things like that? So most of our initiatives that we've been working on have been focusing on speed of work and accelerating opportunities to find savings that can be reinvested in growth, because we are a growth company.
Awesome. Thanks, Stacy. I am so delighted to have all 3 of you on the panel, and also the representation of different industries and backgrounds and global footprints. I think this is going to be a good group to be able to get a sense of how to triangulate on some best practices that can actually work across industries and geographies. So with that, Stacey, I'm going to have you start us off. I want to basically address 6 or 7 topics today, and then we'll move into some sort of general Q&A. But my first question is foundational. I want to understand if we go back in time, when you first set up your transformation office, what was the biggest surprise or challenge that you didn't anticipate, and how did you navigate it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we established our enterprise transformation office in the fall of 2020. So we're getting pretty close to our 5-year anniversary. And when we first established that office, we were given the mandate to basically focus on more of like faster delivery of our products. So essentially we were doing an agile transformation. That's essentially what we were doing. And we had the mandate came from our executive, who basically was the head, oversaw like our operations and sales. So not our CEO, but basically the number 2 in the organization. But we had the head nod from the CEO. And so we're like, great, let's go. So we go and engage with product and technology, and we bring in all of the experts. We define what we want to do from an agile perspective and how we want to standardize on a model across Visa. And we did not have sufficient buy-in. Not everybody was aligned on this mandate. So for us, the biggest surprise was, being set up and being established as an enterprise transformation office, and then realizing that we didn't have complete buy-in or support or alignment from the executives down. So we had to do, I don't know if you want me to talk about how we navigated through that, or
Sure.
I can do that now, or we can talk about that
No, let's
later.
hear it. I love I don't think you intended the double entendre if we were set up, but I'd like you to unpack it a little bit.
Yes. And ironically, I'm sure it will come up later. So I think we were in some way set up to fail. And so we have redefined what we call our ETO since then. So I'm sure we'll cover that later. So when we realized that we had this resistance, we then ended up spending a lot of time just managing and understanding why there was so much resistance from the other executive stakeholders in product and tech. And so what became very clear is that this is not an enterprise-wide initiative. And so we should not be playing in that space. It's not white space that we can own. So the way we navigated the issue is we worked through getting alignment on where could we go as an enterprise. And so we called that Base Camp 1, which was basically getting us all on the same standard templates within Jira, and using Jira Align, and getting everybody migrated, getting their data over. We achieved Base Camp 1, and then we pulled out and moved on, and we pivoted, which I can talk about later. And then product and tech leaders have taken that initiative forward and made a lot of progress over the past 5 years.
Great. Love that. I'm going to pivot over to Alex and sort of address the same question. So for you, what was the biggest surprise or challenge you didn't anticipate in setting it up?
Where do I start? I think I'd build on where Stacey was going there, but it was the span of controls that I didn't have. So from background in telecoms, I would build mobile networks, broadband networks. There would be a board or a shareholder mandate or a P&L objective or a company turnaround. All these things we've seen in different business lines. And I would have authority to do it. I would have budget capability. I could build a team of great people to do it. And sometimes we get the results we're after. And sometimes we look back and go, we'll have to pivot what we're doing here because that's not quite working. The transformation team at GDC was set up with CEO sponsorship, same sort of themes. Let's go and do this, small people. And I think we examined at your Austin event the concept of inflicting help. We felt like we're starting to inflict help. So gathering a portfolio of OKRs, trying to gather that from the business to understand what they were doing, the different functions, the different teams. There are 20 of them: product, sales strategy, technology, et cetera, like every company has. At the end of it, they're like, yeah, that's great. Here's my OKRs. Cheers, transformation team. I'm just cracking on with my day job. But I like you. You seem nice guys. Good luck. And I think that's what we got to. The trouble is, how do you fix it? The navigation is to be sort of brutally honest about not trying to be in that position. Because then everyone starts to go, the transformation team, so what value are they delivering? How are they actually helping? Some people like, I like what they're trying to do. So you have to balance this. We started to look at a service model. So what can we actually offer the functions and teams to allow them to need us? And sorry, I don't want to be too needy, but we wanted them to need us, because if you want to get someone hired, you'll go through the process of HR and finance, and they'll say you need to stipulate this, you need to go through a budgetary process, governance process, and you eventually get your hire. Working with the transformation team wasn't like that, wasn't structured and governed. So we looked to say, well, look, we'll build a portfolio of big rocks for the businesses, but now we need to actually, build a game where we can develop business cases. So if you want to roll out an ERP, let's look at the benefits for it. Is it just a cost of ERP because we're going global and we can't actually get to the yielded efficiencies that we want? Or are they there? Sometimes working that out and offering that up as a service to the organization, where numbers are quite difficult and quite challenging, started to bring us closer, so we'd understand the plan, the roadmap, where costs were, where the efficiencies could be developed. And then you'd understand the ecosystems of systems, and then you understand their challenges, and then you'd understand where people weren't talking to each other. And everyone talks about silos; they just happen in big global businesses. But by offering up numbers and a service which we can build your business cases, enabled us to get closer to the problem and then become an ally rather than, hi TMO, here's my latest on the monthly transformating meeting. Bye. And they didn't mean to do that, but understand why they did. As soon as we moved to a service model, different engagement.
Love that. And we've talked a lot in this series in the prior sessions about the sort of the importance of speaking CFO and the ability to be a resource to actually build the credibility around business cases, both for our partners as well as for our own office. So I'm glad you touched on that topic today. Lindsay, I want to
just the last thing. It's so important just to do the numbers.
Yeah.
Because the numbers give you a gateway and a platform for which to have a structured conversation. And if the numbers don't add up, then sometimes we shouldn't actually be doing it, even though it feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Great, thank you. I'm gonna, Lindsay, before I pass it to you for your thoughts on this, I also want to introduce a topic that Tamara kicked in, because I know that from our conversations, you can speak to this. Tamara Glover asks, it would be good to know, as the panelists are sharing, if at the time they were building their transformation office, if they were already senior executives, if they were middle management or grassroots frontline. I know that you started yours actually in earlier in your career. You've grown a lot with the transformation office. You started with 2 folks. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your big surprises and challenges within that context as well.
Yeah, so I certainly echo a lot of what Alex and Stacy shared about early learnings around buy-in and really just how you're setting the model up. I was fortunate because I had about 10 years of tenure in a senior leadership role under my belt when I was asked to stand up the transformation office within my current organization. So I had some tailwinds to kind of build off of between the credibility that I had built. But in addition to that, we had a lot of failed transformations before we had a dedicated team. So the organization itself had gone through a lot of really hard lessons learned over that 10-year period, where buy-in wasn't the biggest challenge like I expected it to be. The biggest challenge was actually how there was a lack of knowledge and understanding of what a transformation office even was, what that meant for the organization, how the organization would benefit from it, and what that ultimately meant in the day-to-day. It was really challenging to get everybody to realize it wasn't just a PMO team. It was much bigger than that, and the value beyond that was much bigger. So I was able to kind of benefit from a lot of the relationships I had already established as that senior leader. However, a lot of the early days required us to just educate the organization on what it meant to have a transformation office, what a transformation office wasn't, and ultimately what was that value narrative that we could bring to the organization. And we wrote it in a way that really resonated with everybody, CFOs down to our frontline team members, to make sure that they understood how they benefited from the organization having a dedicated transformation team, and ultimately how that would evolve as we continued to mature along the maturity scale. So a little bit different from a buy-in perspective. I consider myself fortunate. I have lots of conversations with peers in the industry that are still struggling with buy-in a couple of years in. That thankfully wasn't our biggest challenge. But the lack of just knowledge, understanding, and how to really engage and use a transformation office was a pretty big one for us.
That's so great because I think, we the idea that your jobs are so multivariate, you're putting on so many hats, and one of them is as marketer, right? That we actually have to build a brand for our transformation office while we're building the transformation office. And it does require thinking about how do we get the right messages out? How do we build awareness and support and advocacy? How do we become business partners when it didn't
Mhm.
exist before? So thank you for sharing that thought. Lindsay, I'm going to stay with you as we move to our next topic, which is looking back. What do you wish you had done differently in the first 6 to 12 months, kind of those first critical months of establishing that reputation for the transformation office?
Yeah, so I'll keep with the similar theme around the education. You know, I think I made the mistake early on of assuming that the organization knew what an office of transformation was when they asked me to build it,
Mm.
which was not the case. And I quickly realized that, in many cases, everybody had different definitions of what transformation meant. Everybody had different expectations of what a specific PMO team would do. And I really underestimated how much time I'd spend trying to bring the organization along for the journey to making sure that they bought into the right vision. So, fast forward about probably 9 months into launching the team, we had built the PMO function first. So naturally, you'd assume that people just equate a transformation office to a PMO team. What I could have done differently is started communicating that value narrative sooner and to really just share what the vision of how we were going to grow the Office of Transformation beyond PMO was. So that way, everybody understood A, they're along for the ride. We're bringing the organization along for the journey as we continue to grow and scale. But two, it doesn't just start and stop with the PMO team, that we're going to continue to add a change management office, an implementation team, an executive support office, and that we'll continue to grow that value and that those service offerings as the organization continues to need them. So I'd say that I probably would have done that sooner. It took a little bit of re-educating people. I'd say we're probably still recalibrating on that narrative even today, 3 years in. But that was a big opportunity that I didn't expect to have to, unpack, and one that I wish I had done sooner.
Change is always constant, even for the change people. So,
Yes.
Stacy, other thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say number one, we would not have set up the enterprise transformation office with the mandate to do the agile transformation. That should have just been a Tiger team that was set up to specifically drive that transformation initiative, similar to how other like our sales focused initiatives and things like that get driven. So that was mistake number one. The other is when we first, and this will answer one of the questions, when we first set up the enterprise transformation office, we were very senior heavy. So we were small. We were maybe 7 or 8 people when we first started in that 2020, 2021 time frame. And we were like 5 vice presidents and then the SVP and then like 2 people. And so lower than that. We have since flipped that. And so coming in, we brought in all of those experts, people who knew how to drive change within the organization, people who are agile experts, people who are experts in how we do our business operations, but we had no doers. And so we would have done that differently. And when we pivoted, that's how we flipped and how we were able to flip from 7 to now being like 27 is because we brought in a lot more junior talent who are really helping us with doing like what Alex was saying, that analysis to really understand if we make these operational model changes, how much are we going to realize from a revenue generation perspective or cost avoidance perspective. And then the third thing we would have done differently is established what is it that we should be working on and pick 1 or 2 things that we can establish a reputation very quickly, get something, within a 6-week sprint or a 3-month sprint, get something out there that is demonstrating value so we can educate the organization and pick those in full alignment with the CEO versus the number 2 person or one of the other executives. So those are the 3 things we should have done differently, which we did do when we pivoted 18 months into the office's existence.
You just saved a bunch of people a bunch of time.
I hope so.
Alex, what
Learn
would you
from
add?
us.
I'd probably go back to OKRs.
Mhm.
So I joined the team, say, 18 months into its existence. So good sponsorship, everyone buying in, lots of TMO champions that we brought on board to connect with the different functions, running ingress and egress information together, building a bit of a relationship. We built a brand. like Lindsay and Stacey done, which is one GDC. We're going to come together globally, and everyone felt comfortable with this. I think the issue we didn't solve, which I wish we'd done when I arrived, we became sort of, what about this TMO team? What about the procurement process in Europe? Why can't I get data on value and data center in the Asia Pacific region? I'm having problems with capital recycling. What can you do? So it was really nice and sort of respectful that the functions are asking us to try and solve these questions, but these are questions that they needed to solve themselves,
Right.
or talk to their respective functions around. So it can be reputation control issues, which is if you don't seem to be solving these issues that they think that you might do as a transformation team, your value and reputation can be damaged. So I think the way we addressed that as well was to just get closer to, thanks very much for this. Why don't we explore it at Steerco? Why do you invite me into the next steering committee where we're talking about new foundational technology systems going in, the procurement process, building new data centers more effectively, cost and revenue controls. Let's get closer to that problem, and then we can start harness where the real problem is, get down to it, get really clear on what it is, and then who owns it. And if we get clear who owns it, then we can get exec sponsorship, we can build a business case, we can run the numbers, we can get expected yield when this thing is solved. And if you're then in a position where to solve it, you don't have the resource, or you need a systems integrator, or whatever the need is, the business case will help fund it. So I think we've got there slowly, but by attrition, blood, sweat and tears. But I feel we're in a better place just because we're closer to exploring problems, getting clear who owns them, how we're going to solve it. And also, if we don't know how to solve it, we need to try and work it out together. So I wish we'd not been sort of ingress, this is a problem. I think we just caught it and then gone deep and quickly into just understanding where the problem derives from. It would have helped us with our reputation a lot quicker.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to stay with you, Alex, because you're leaning right into our next topic. So let's build on this a little bit. And I'd like to talk, you've all talked a little bit about that C-suite engagement and sort of how we build that. I'd like to understand, how do you secure that executive sponsorship and maintain that engagement over time?
I think this is where the business, if a business wants a transformation team, it needs to be really clear about asking itself whether it's doing it for lip service and it sounds cool, or they really believe in it. Transformation team, well, I suppose I'll unpack that, should sit within the CEO's world. So it should be a sort of an extension of the office of the CEO, in my opinion. We essentially work for the chief of staff to the CEO. And we have regular cadence and meetings with the chief of staff about where we are, what's going on. We'll look at the portfolio of OKRs and say, well, look, actually, do you know what? There's 164. Feels actually good that we've got them. But 84% of those are just BAU, aren't they, really? People's dressed up at OKR into what they actually do. That's okay. We'll take that. None of them, these are actually smart metrics. None of these are actually going to change the P&L for the business. None of these are actually looking at the second half budgetary pressure that we've got to look at. So I think it's just critical you have that. You need to be sponsored to the right environment. You need to have regular communication with them. You need to then communicate out to the business under their sponsorship. So if they're doing town halls or quarterly business reviews, or they're doing CEO comms, the transformation message is constantly going out, beaconed from these communication, get it into the language. But they can only get that if they're fed it by us. So executive sponsorship starts at the beginning, which has to stay close to the CEO and the CEO's office. And you have to have complete open relationship about what's working and what isn't. And everything changes every 2 months. So I would say that, and I think I saw something in the chat, which is, where does it actually sit? You need to get closer. And you often see these things where a chief digital officer has set up a transformation team, or it's in the technology world, or maybe it's an offshoot of an operational world. That really presents challenges for the TMO, because in order to maintain that C-level engagement over time, you need to be next to them.
Yeah, Thank you. I think you were speaking to Carl's question, which was which function do your respective transformation offices sit within, and to what executive does your team report? So we just heard Alex make a strong statement for got to be at the C-suite. That's the point of connection. Stacy, I saw you nodding vigorously when he said that, so maybe we can hear from you next. Oh, audio.
You can't hear me?
There we can now.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so I completely agree that the transformation office will have its most success if it is reporting up into the CEO. In our situation, it is not currently a direct report into the CEO, but the model is working. So the way we're doing the model is the transformation office currently sits within the organization of our chief administration officer. So this is where all the operations happens in the company. So it's where the people team is, it's where our corporate services is, or our communications teams, et cetera. So that's where we currently report. However, it's like almost this unofficial dotted line. And so it's essentially the way our CEO thinks about it is that I have this enterprise transformation office. I'm not ready to have it be a direct report to me, but they are serving 2 of my 8 OKRs. So we're very similar to Alex, where we have clear OKRs, and that's how we manage our business. And so our CEO has an OKR that's very focused on business operations, driving that efficiency, driving a more mature operating model. And then he also has one that's around the cultural changes, the behaviors that we need to see shift in our company in order to see that acceleration. So we work on initiatives that are underneath both of those. And so then we have regular engagements with him, either as part of his CEO days or part of his executive meetings, to then say, how are we progressing in the support of these 2 OKRs? What initiatives do you want us to work on in this fiscal year? And then we provide reports on a regular basis on those initiatives. And then right now, currently, we're working on a huge one, which I can't talk about, but that's like predominantly been where his focus is. And to Alex's point, we have connected that to very strong realized benefits to the bottom line. And he is very interested in that. And so we get a lot of engagement with him more than even just quarterly, because he is so interested in our ability to progress this initiative and realize this material impact on the business.
Thanks, Stacy. So whether direct line or dotted line, still an emphasis on how important it is and how to get there. Lindsay, any differences from where you're sitting?
Very similar. The 2 things that I'd add in terms of how to maintain the engagement and then just that reporting structure, we also decided to launch what we refer to, and it's very similar to a steering committee, but a transformation planning group. And that is at the C-suite level, and it includes a couple of key senior leaders, including our president, who essentially oversees the entire transformation effort. So that's where key decisions get made. We unstick roadblocks, we make sure that we're charting the path for next steps. So we were really thoughtful in making sure that it didn't feel like we were providing too much governance over the transformation strategy, but it helped to, one, make quick decisions and not be paralyzed by a larger C-suite, group that requires a lot of conversation to do that, but to also help ensure that we've got that buy-in where they're threading that needle across all of their peer groups. So that's been really effective for us. And then in addition to that, I always joke and say that, as a leader of a transformation office, I also underestimated how much of my job was going to be in sales, to just continue to sell the value of what we're bringing every day. Early on, I recognized that I needed to know who were our adopters and who would be our biggest skeptics. Many people think CFO, that's typically the biggest skeptic of a transformation office. So I meet with her biweekly to make sure that she's got a finger on the pulse. She understands what the portfolio is doing, what's coming next. I understand what her biggest areas of concern are, and I'm able to speak her language. And then, when another initiative comes up, I'm able to tailor that message to exactly what she's trying to accomplish. So I do that with every C-suite team member. Each one needs something a little bit different. They all speak different languages, and sometimes they have different agendas. So really understanding that audience and making sure that you're able to speak that language across all of them is critical.
So Lindsay, I'm going to stick with you. So on this topic of sales, I think that's a good segue into our next topic as well, which is So in doing that, how do you balance that need for those quick wins that are going to help you continue to build that reputation for action with building that long-term strategic impact that we know comes from some of the more sort of deep enterprise level change?
Man, that is such a balancing act. I think Stacy mentioned it earlier too, but the need to identify early on, like what can be a quick win for your team. We did something very similar. Within the first year, we identified what can we say yes to, even if as we scale, it wouldn't be something that we'd continue to support because we really needed to prove concept around the transformation office. So we identified what are the things that would remain consistent regardless of that maturity scale long term for the office versus what are things that would prove value, could be a proof of concept, but allows us to kind of grow and infuse ourselves within the organization. So identifying those things really early on was super helpful. But we also solicited feedback from other leaders on what could be quick wins that they'd like us to see. So it wasn't a decision we made in a silo. It was very collaborative. We communicated across not just the C-suite, but also down to our frontline managers because they're so close to the day-to-day business that we wanted to understand what are their challenges and where could a transformation office specifically help. So things like, easier projects that maybe long-term won't warrant a PM, but early on makes a lot of sense just to get the work done and to show the value. That was an example of a quick win. Another was hiring the right people. We are very privileged to have our senior director. He came from Salesforce and he has a lot of experience in building PMO teams. So I hired him within the first 90 days of us launching the office, and he just hit the ground running. So that is another example of a quick win where we're bringing on the right people to really show what we're able to bring to the organization. And then that long-term strategic impact, I keep, harping on this, but storytelling is critical. I always joke and say, people may not care how the sausage is made, but it's important for them to understand it. And that's where the magic of transformation typically happens. So while we're having these quick wins and we're celebrating the bigger ones, we're also making sure that the organization understands why are we doing what we do every day and how is that laddering up to our North Star within our 5-year vision. So if it's not a clear, if we can't connect the dots clearly to the North Star, we're always asking why we're doing it. But that's really our storyline. So people understand, the work that we're doing today gets us this in 2 years. And we continue to connect the dots specifically for that narrative.
Great practical examples. Thank you very much, Lindsay. Other thoughts, Alex or Stacy?
I was just going to add one thing because I 100% agree there. The one watch out that we currently are experiencing. So we did such a good job on our quick wins and repairing our reputation that then we were getting inundated with a lot of requests for engagement. So we did 2 things. One, we got very prescriptive about when we would do an engagement and when we wouldn't. And we actually set them up just like you would with a consulting firm, with a charter, a clear scope, clear timeline, and then we would keep to that. And we've been slowly reducing the amount of those engagements we're saying yes to because there's a huge appetite now for us to do a couple of these big long-term initiatives that require almost all of our time. So we are trying to do less of those quick wins. Now, the challenge with that is that there isn't a machine that then is moving those forward. So we actually are flipping the other way, where right now we are overbalanced on the long term and we're ignoring some of the shorter term opportunities. And so those people are languishing a little bit. So I think it's for us, you balance it based on what the CEO wants to do and cares about. And so that's where we lean. And then you have to make compromises, recognizing that you might leave some work on the table and again, I expect that work will come back in 6 months or a year. I mean, we're not in some of these industries where it's life or death. So it's okay if it takes a year for that particular operating, team to improve their work.
Yeah, thank you for that watch out. It's I think that is a constant balancing act, and it also requires an incredible amount of visibility. And so that's probably an entire another discussion about how we balance those portfolios. But Alex, I'm going to go to another topic with you, which is something that's near and dear to my heart, which is what's the right model for the future? I mean, I recognize that this is going to completely depend on your organization, how it's structured. But I think one thing that as we embrace this topic, as we're talking particularly about global organizations or organizations with distributed businesses and geographies is how do you get that balance right between having a strong central function, but tailoring it at the periphery appropriately and making sure that we've got the right understanding of what's different in each of these peripheral areas and how we adjust to that. So to that question, curious about your thoughts about how to determine the right operating model on a spectrum from centralized to distributed with hybrid in the middle. Kind of what are the trade-offs that you see and where have you landed?
We have a centralized model, and one of the things we've been trying to do, where we have 4 separate regions operating autonomously, being successful, and pulling them together. So, for example, there were 4 CEOs. Now there's 1.
Okay.
Then you have the systems, you have the people coming together. So naturally, the TMO is a centralized model. The trouble with that, and the problem is where it's born. So the TMO was born in Seattle with Seattle resources. That's why I'm here in a golf club in Seattle, so forgive my background. So it became almost a US-centric received operating model, which was then perceived to potentially be not considering the concepts or needs of the European team, or Asia Pac, or Japan, or India. So I think if you have a centralized model, it makes sense. Distributed hybrid makes sense. I suppose it's having the right resources. So that's why, British National gets hired based in the UK to bring balance in the communication to the TMO across to Europe. So I can build relationships with the head offices in Frankfurt or London, and they know me. And it's not just seen as a US-centric driven TMO change program. It's structured programmatic change that's representing cultural differences or cultural needs or nuances or where the market's differing. Similarly, we've hired someone who works in Mumbai in the India office as well. We haven't quite got to a representative in Japan or the Asia Pacific region, but that's on the roadmap. So I think you can have a centralized model, but perhaps you need a distributed cultural approach to how you run and operate a TMO. Obviously, that creates horrendous problems in things like time differences and keeping together. But our concept was, by doing this, could you create sort of a 24/7 or maybe 5 days a week model where the TMO is always working in different regions under a centralized mandate of one GDC. So I think centralized is a good idea if you can do it, but don't forget to play a regional resource play within your TMO.
Love that. Lindsay, how about your model?
Yeah, we're centralized. And I think I mentioned in my intro too that, we had a couple of approaches prior to launching a centralized transformation office, including one that was very dispersed, and it just was not effective for our organization. I'd say depending on the initiative, you could probably argue that it's hybrid because it's very cross-functional. So for example, and I think that this is likely a best practice most people deploy, but our change management office, we have change influencers that are dedicated points of contact that don't report up to the transformation office for anything other than representing the department that they work for, to make sure that we're navigating change with their teams in mind and they're able to be a voice in the room. But yeah, we're centralized and it's been very successful for us.
Right. And also that emphasis on it, we can be centralized, but we still need to have that connective tissue out in some ways. We've got to find
100%.
how to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Stacy?
I would say we're probably a little bit more on the hybrid model. So not every transformation runs through the enterprise transformation office. So we are not centralized. And but anything that we own, we're driving centrally. So we do, right? Everyone who's working on that does report up into the chief transformation office in that regard. But a sales transformation that's really focusing on accelerating our deals and close of deals is being driven by a transformation group that is in sales, reporting into the head of sales. We have the same thing in finance. We have the same thing in our service organization, et cetera. So I would say we're more of a hybrid because they are doing their own transformations. We're the enterprise one. And then we link where we need to link, where if we're doing something on the operating model for the whole enterprise, then if they're doing something on the sales model, we need to make sure that it ticks and ties. But we actually are not leading that work, or even most of the time, not even consulting or participating in that transformation work. It's just more staying connected to make sure that it's all aligned.
Yeah, that connective tissue always comes up in a topic when I'm talking to anyone around this is sort of the soft stuff of the relationships that you need to engender to make this work, whether you're in a centralized model or decentralized model. It's such a critical element to sort of build those bridges in some way. So I'm glad we all touched on that today. We're going to go to our speed round questions now. So I'm just going to ask one quick question to each of you, and then we're going to move to Q&A from the audience. I'd love to know if you could give one piece of advice to someone starting a transformation office tomorrow. What would your bullet point be? What's your headline? Who'd like to go first? Alex has got his finger
Uh,
up. Let's go.
keep it high, keep corporate distance low, do your numbers.
Keep it high, corporate distance numbers. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, focus on the business value. So know exactly what you're driving to and what the business impact is going to be. And don't try to be the group that is organizing everything or trying to manage everything across the enterprise. Just focus on one or two things in the beginning that are going to deliver that value.
All right. Thanks, Stacy. How about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I'd say be the transformation expert, but meet the organization with where they're at and not try to force best practices they're not ready for.
Readiness. Okay. Thank you. And it highlights the need for us to be a force for enablement, but not pushing it down people's throats, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you all. Well, so let's do this now. I'd like to open this up for some questions from the audience. Julie, I think what we'll do is if you've seen any questions in the chat that we haven't yet hit that you think we should hit, why don't you start with that? And then maybe we'll just open up the mics and let people raise their hand and we can call upon folks that are interested in asking a question of our audience and our panelists. So, Julie?
Yes, so there is one question. Sorry, my audio went out for a few seconds. I'm not 100% sure if we've answered this already. But Rebecca asks, were any of you running multiple departments while building a TO?
I wanted to answer that question. I saw it coming in through the chat. So the answer for us was yes, until just recently. So when we first set it up and we were focusing on the agile transformation, then our chief transformation officer was also running the consumer product business, which created a ton of confusion. Then when we pivoted and a new leader came in, so we transitioned and a different leader came in who was an internal leader. And that leader also had people team responsibilities. And I would say this was very challenging. But the reason why we had people who were running multiple departments was because we were trying to build up the reputation and the credibility. Now that we've successfully done that, our chief transformation officer is only doing transformation now and has no other responsibilities.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I agree with Stacy. So up until recently, I was managing multiple functions. We're an education institution and I manage curriculum. So two very big jobs, standing up a transformation office and driving our curriculum development. And agree, there were some good efficiencies and, weaving in transformation practices into that. But it's much better now that I'm able to just really focus on the transformation office overall.
Thanks, Lindsay. So why don't we open up Susan's mic and we can have Susan ask the question that just came into the chat.
All right, let's do that. So Susan, try to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. I love the advice about starting small and trying to just pick something to focus on to build credibility. But sometimes I've faced with great, but we're still trying to get support for it. So they don't want to give the resources until you can kind of prove it. So I'm trying to figure out what's the smallest number of people to ask for, right? I know what I would need, but I think there's a hesitation to put people on it without proving it. So I'd be interested to hear what you experienced.
The chicken and egg problem.
Yes, yes,
What's
it is.
minimum efficient scale to get us to prove the value? Thoughts on that? I might even build on that question and say either minimum efficient number of people or minimum efficient functions to take on.
It's
I'll have a go.
You go first,
if I
Alex.
can.
You go first.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Stacey. I think it's really tricky because you're beginning at the beginning.
Yeah.
So the business wants a transformation program to yield results to either solve a problem, grow, be more successful, client centricity, whatever it may be, maybe all of the above. But you want this and you want a transformation team, but you're not prepared to invest. That's a bit of a dichotomy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a bit odd, but it exists. So you at least need one to start.
Right.
The way that NTT solved it was they then used contractors for a period of time. So they found a sort of mid-tier good consultancy firm to help them lift things off and get things started with you, which is if you're not seeing the benefit, then we can easily pull back from this position. But if you do see the benefit, then we can now swap out these people and have our own people come in as new hires and we start to build the TMO muscle globally. I think that's one opportunity. I suppose the underlying message in exec pitch is if you want fundamental strategic programmatic change to be enabled across your enterprise-wide business, you need to invest in it. It's quite normal you have a marketing function and a product function and a sales function and an HR function and a finance function. Why don't you see a transformation team in the same light? A CTO or a CDO a few years ago was, relatively new. Now they're the mainstay of an organization. And I think it's actually just having this strong argument and with some mediation points. It's okay, let me start with some contractors. Let me lift this thing up. Let me make this thing work. And in 6 months, I'll show you a couple of, although I don't like the term quick wins or low hanging fruit, give me a couple of things that you really need, you think will actually change the P&L. So I can then say, we delivered this. It had a net effect of 2 or 3 million in the financial year. Give me 3 heads. Yeah. And I can give you more. So it's also about your negotiation platform as well. So that's one idea that may be useful for you. I hope that helps, Susan.
Thank you.
Good hack. Stacy, it looks like you had a comment as well. No, okay, we're good. Let's go to, actually, I want to embrace Teresa's question. Teresa, if you don't mind, I'd love to have you ask the question that you put in about storytelling, and we've got your mic open.
Sorry about that. We're having a small technical issue. Teresa, can you unmute yourself?
Am
There we
I
go.
live now?
There we go.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so I think it was Lindsay in particular who mentioned storytelling several times. And I was just curious how you handle that function. Is that something that you do with your team, included as part of the TO? Or are you looking to that outside of your TO, someplace else in the organization? Just curious how you build that in.
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple of things that we currently do. One, we have a very close partnership with our marketing team. So the whole transformation office is an input to all of our internal and external communications that get sent out. And we were part, and they were part. It was a collaborative exercise to actually come up with that transformation narrative that they now infuse in their whole communication strategy. So that was a really big piece of it. It includes things like making sure we always have a transformation update in every town hall meeting we have, every leadership team meeting we have, and that the messaging of, that North Star and the journey along the way is infused in every single newsletter, social media ad that we post and things like that. And then in addition to that, I actually invested in training my whole team on improving their communication skills. We're a really big fan of Smart Brevity. If you're not familiar, I highly recommend learning and reading that book, but really just becoming masters of communication and upskilling the team to be able to lead by example, make sure that they're able to storytell really in every communication that they do, and that they can continue to build on that great work that we partnered with marketing on. So it's a little bit of both. We have it within our control, and then we're an input into marketing.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Welcome.
Any other thoughts from the other panelists? This topic did come up quite a bit, so I'd love to hear if there's any additional suggestions or recommendations.
Yeah, I don't, we use Smart Brevity as well. So I didn't have anything in addition to add. Lindsay said it perfectly.
All right, 2 plugs for smart brevity. The last question before we pull to a close, I want to see if we can open up the mic for Zachary Wolfson, who has a question about one of the challenges, of course, how to persuade people to make change when they might be resistant. So, Zachary, do you want to give us a little bit more context on your question, and we'll see. We'll close with that today.
Zachary, I believe you're unmuted. Do you want to try talking now?
All right, I'll tell you what, I'll read the question, which is this. Do you have any advice on helping manage project sponsor resistance when supporting an initiative? So we talked a lot about how do we build those bridges and build that connective tissue? How do we work with a sponsor that's resistant around an initiative that maybe we're tasked with shepherding?
Yeah, I mean, this is I'll start first. I will echo back to when we were asked to do to accelerate product delivery, and so essentially we're doing that agile transformation.
Mhm.
And then we had heads of product, heads of businesses that did not want to move to the common template, the common platform. So very resistant. And we needed them to then sponsor the change. So the way we had to manage that is we had to go all the way up to the top to the CEO to basically fix that problem, to basically say, this is a company mandate, you need to get on the bus, no choice. So that's how we had to manage that. Now moving forward, we don't do anything unless we have either the CEO or one of his direct reports is actively sponsoring the change and it's in their OKRs. Otherwise, we won't take it. We just won't do the work. Because that's not our role. Our role is to drive material impact, like to Alex's point, very quick impact on the P&L. And so we won't engage if there isn't an executive who's bought in for that same business outcome.
Great. Thank you. All right, well, tell you what, we've got just a couple minutes left, and what I'd like to do is bring this to a bit of a close, as well as talk a little bit about next steps. For me, a key takeaway from this entire series, and then especially emphasized in a lot of what I heard from people today, is that standing up a transformation office is as much about culture and leadership, as evidenced by this conversation we're having right now, as it is about structure and process. So that change capability and change capacity is also part of change agility, and they need to work together. So we need to have both the capabilities and the culture to be able to make it successful. We've heard from the panelists today about the importance to start with clarity, have a very clear scope right out of the gate, scope of the team, scope of the mission, scope of the mandate, so that we can communicate often and early about what we're doing and why, and help other people understand the role as well. So that communication is really, really important. And then staying relentlessly aligned with your organizational strategy, making sure that you are aligned with the C-suite, you're aligned with the CFO, you're aligned with the organizational strategy, and you can constantly develop that line of sight. So heard these themes from each of you today, and I'm so grateful for that. In terms of next steps, there will be, when we close this webinar, there's going to be a survey about the series. I'd love it if you've got time to take the survey and let us know what's worked and what's not and how we can make it better. So these series are really in service to each of you. And any feedback you can provide us to help us improve them would be great, and we'll build it into the next series we bring to you. Also want to plug a webinar that's coming up. Nellie Wartoff, the CEO of Tigerhall, will be doing a webinar on August 14th on building in-house capabilities for always on change. So if you're interested in that, we'll drop the link in the chat. With that, I want to just thank each of you, Alex and Lindsay and Stacy. You have brought us so much wisdom, so many hacks, so many great best practices that we can apply. And I'm just really grateful for you to share your time and your wisdom with us today. So on behalf of everybody in the audience, thanks so much to our panelists and sharing your wisdom with us today.
My pleasure.
Digital applause by Zoom if you
Thank
can.
you.